Two officers thought they could brutalize the wrong man and walk away without consequence. They were wrong, and the reckoning came harder than they ever imagined. It all began on a heavy Saturday night in Wichita Falls, Texas, the kind of night so thick with heat that even the sidewalks seemed to hold their breath. Outside a modest corner store called Sammy's Quick Mart, a man in navy blue scrubs was fumbling with a bag of groceries and his car keys. His name was Deshaun Briggs, 34 years old, patient, gentle. The kind of soul who tipped extra at diners without a second thought and held doors open for strangers like it was second nature. He had just completed a grueling 12-hour shift at Shepherd Medical Center, stitching wounds, tending to trauma, saving lives. The kind of thankless labor the world rarely applauds. All he wanted in that moment was to peel off his sneakers, sink into his worn couch, and devour the leftover barbecue calling from his refrigerator. His mind was blissfully blank until chaos descended. The screech of tires ripped through the night. Car doors slammed open, and heavy boots thundered against the pavement, charging straight toward him. "Hey, drop the bag now!" barked a voice behind him. Startled, Deshaun turned, groceries still clutched in hand, Gatorades, chips, a tired man's simple comforts, as two police officers stormed toward him. One was a stocky, red-buzzed figure, the other lanky, with a wiry mustache that only heightened the boyish panic in his wide eyes. Both had their hands twitching inches from their holsters. "I just came out of the store, man." "What's going on?" Deshaun said, voice calm, low, careful not to spark a fire he couldn't put out. The shorter cop, Officer Brent Harlow, his badge gleaming like a threat, stormed up and swatted the grocery bag from Deshaun's hands as though it were refuse. Bottles of Gatorade rolled into the street, spinning and clinking against the curb. "You match the description," Harlow snapped. "So shut your mouth and put your hands behind your back." Deshaun blinked, confusion tightening his chest. What description? He barely managed to say it before the second cop, Officer Dylan Markey, seized his wrist and wrenched it behind his back with brutal force. Around them, gas pumps fell silent. A woman raised her phone recording. A teenager froze mid-step, sneakers half off the pavement. The handcuffs bit into Deshaun's skin with a metallic clink that echoed in his ears. "I work at the hospital. I'm a nurse," he said through clenched teeth. "Yeah? And I'm the King of England," Harlow sneered. Deshaun could have fought. He could have shouted. But he didn't. He knew how those stories ended. Instead, he stood there on Broad Street, wrists shackled, cheeks burning, heart pounding like a slow, defiant drum beat against his ribs. He thought of his mother, who had always said, "Keep your dignity, no matter what." He thought of the uniform folded carefully in his closet, medals tucked between the folds. Not now, Deshaun told himself, but soon. If he believed the nightmare was over, he was heartbreakingly mistaken. The ride to the station was short, but every second stretched into an eternity. Deshaun sat rigid, wrists raw, as the two officers up front laughed about a basketball game on the radio, never once glancing back at him. No rights read, no explanation offered. Just the choking smell of sweat, bitter coffee, and stale vinyl. At the cracked parking lot of the Wichita Falls Police Department, Harlow yanked Deshaun from the car like he was tossing out a piece of garbage. Deshaun's elbow scraped hard against the doorframe. He winced but still said nothing. Inside, beneath the cold glare of fluorescent lights, the desk clerk, an older woman with silver hair knotted at the nape of her neck, looked up from her crossword puzzle. Her eyes flicked from Deshaun to the officers, and something subtle, something heavy, passed across her face. Recognition? Regret? She didn't say. "Booking for shoplifting suspect," Markey barked, slamming a clipboard onto the desk. The woman buzzed open the steel door without protest. Deshaun didn't resist, didn't beg, didn't scream. They tossed him into a cell, 4 concrete walls, a steel bench, a fluorescent hum, and left him there. No phone call, no paperwork, no answers. Hours crawled by. 1, 2, 3. No one came. When the door finally creaked open, it wasn't a lawyer or a detective. It was Harlow again, holding a limp manila folder. "Turns out you're not our guy," he said, flipping open the folder with a theatrical shrug. Deshaun sat frozen, hands locked into fists on his knees. "You fit the description, though," Harlow added, as casually as if he'd misplaced a TV remote. "Dark hoodie, dark pants, male, black." There it was. No apology, no accountability, just a shrug and a smirk. "You're free to go," Harlow said, tossing the folder like trash onto the bench. Deshaun rose slowly, his legs aching from the cold cement. He walked past them without a word. But it wasn't because he had nothing to say. It was because he was planning something far bigger. Outside, the night air slapped against his skin, cooler now, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a soda can shaken to the point of explosion, dents showing on the outside, fury swirling inside. But Deshaun Briggs was not the kind of man to explode. He was the kind to move in silence, and let that silence become deafening. That night, Deshaun sat alone at his kitchen table, the faint hum of the stove, hood the only sound. His phone buzzed and buzzed. Friends, co-workers, strangers. Someone had uploaded the video of his arrest. It was spreading like wildfire. He scrolled through the comments, each one slicing deeper than the bruises on his wrists. Another one, "Man was just buying Gatorade. They don't even pretend to hide it anymore." Deshaun read them all, and with every swipe, the pit inside him deepened. He thought about letting it go. He almost did. He thought about going to work the next day, flashing a hollow smile, laughing it off as just another day in America. But then his gaze drifted upward, to the framed photograph above the counter. His father, Reverend Lionel Briggs, standing proud in his army uniform, a man who had survived wars abroad and segregation at home and had taught his son a lesson he could never unlearn: never let them steal your dignity. Deshaun sat up straighter. He rose from the table, crossed the room, and pulled open his closet, past the coats, past the hospital scrubs, all the way to the back. There it was, his army uniform, pressed, polished, medals gleaming in the half-light. Afghanistan, Haiti, Louisiana. Proof that he was not just some suspect. He was a soldier, a veteran, a protector. By midnight, Deshaun had a plan. No screaming into the void online. No desperate videos begging for justice. He would show them exactly who they had dared to humiliate. The next morning, he moved with precision, gathered statements from witnesses, saved screenshots of the viral video, drafted a formal complaint letter. Not a single swear word, not a single typo. And he made one important phone call to an old army buddy now working as a legal advisor. By the time Deshaun zipped up his uniform and straightened his tie, the fear was gone, replaced with something sharper, stronger: resolve. He pulled into the station parking lot at 9 a.m. sharp. This time he didn't slouch. He didn't rush. The sun caught the polished metals on his chest, flashing silver, gold, and bronze, small emblems of a lifetime spent serving and protecting. Across the lot, conversations fell silent. Officers' coffee cups paused halfway to their mouths. Young rookies nudged one another, murmuring. Deshaun adjusted the brim of his cap, straightened his sleeves, and strode through the front doors like a storm. Inside, at the front desk, the same gray-haired woman blinked up at him, her eyes wide, her mouth parting. But she said nothing. She simply buzzed him through. Deshaun's boots echoed sharply against the tile. There they were, Harlow and Markey, lounging at a desk, sipping coffee, laughing over paperwork. Deshaun stopped 10 feet from them. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying like a gavel strike. "I'm here to file an official complaint regarding the actions of your officers." The effect was immediate. Harlow's head whipped around. Markey paled. A hot flush spread across Harlow's face, his hand fumbling at his belt. Recognition hit them like a freight train. Before either man could speak, the desk clerk called out softly, "Sir, the watch commander will see you now." Deshaun didn't spare them a second glance. He simply nodded once, crisp, sharp, and followed her down the hall. Waiting inside was Captain Elise Monroe, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes, no nonsense, and leaning casually against the wall, Army JAG badge gleaming on his belt, was Captain Jeremiah Knox. Both stood as Deshaun entered, their eyes lingering on the medals across his chest. A heavy silence filled the room, the kind that bends the walls and hangs in the lungs. Finally, Captain Monroe spoke, her voice low but resonant. "Mr. Briggs, thank you for coming in." Deshaun stepped forward, tall, proud, unbreakable. And this time, he wasn't just demanding justice. He was justice. The complaint packet sat squarely on the table, a symbol of quiet determination. No shouting, no pleading, just cold, hard truth. Witness statements, security footage, undeniable evidence of unlawful detention, photographs documenting physical injuries, proof of public humiliation inflicted without cause or reason. Captain Knox carefully placed two additional documents atop the pile, a formal request to launch an internal investigation and a notice advising the Department of Defense about the mistreatment of military personnel under their watch. Monroe's face hardened, her voice low but heavy with understanding. "You realize the gravity of this," she said. Deshaun didn't flinch. His gaze locked onto hers with steady, unbreakable resolve. "I know exactly how serious this is," he replied. A beat passed, then another. Beyond the glass window, Harlow and Markey shifted uncomfortably, watching the scene unfold, helpless, unable to interfere. Captain Monroe gave a crisp nod, her professionalism wrapped tightly around her words. "We'll initiate an immediate review," she declared. "Pending the investigation, both officers will be placed on administrative leave." Deshaun didn't celebrate. He didn't smile, didn't raise a triumphant fist. He simply gathered the copies of his documents, tucked them carefully under his arm, and turned to leave. As he moved back through the station lobby, he allowed himself one final glance at Harlow and Markey. Two men who once thought themselves invincible, untouchable, now sitting hollow-eyed, suffocating under the very weight they had so recklessly heaped upon others. But this wasn't the beginning of the storm. The storm was already here, and it would show them no mercy. By Monday morning, the city of Wichita Falls buzzed with a fierce, uneasy energy, and then not the good kind. The video of Deshaun's brutal, unjust arrest had detonated across social media, spilling onto every television screen, every news website. Local anchors ran breathless reports on the hour. Nurse and Army veteran wrongfully arrested, caught on camera. Public humiliation without cause. Wichita Falls PD under fire. By noon, even national news outlets had seized the story, flashing Deshaun's name and bruised face across the country. Under mounting pressure, the mayor's office issued a stiff, scripted statement promising a full and impartial investigation. Meanwhile, inside the police station, Harlow and Markey could feel the walls closing in. They showed up for duty, older somehow, grayer around the edges. Their swagger was gone. Their jokes died on their lips. Whispers slithered down the halls behind them. Colleagues who once laughed at their cruelty now refused to meet their eyes. And then the hammer dropped. Official notices. Administrative leave. Effective immediately. Internal affairs investigation opened. Civil rights attorney retained by Deshaun's legal team. Marky tried to wave it off, mumbling to a few that it was all a big misunderstanding. But no one believed him anymore. Harlow said nothing. His fists remained jammed deep into his jacket pockets, his jaw locked tight. Deshaun hadn't needed to riot. He hadn't needed to scream. He had done something far more devastating. He let the truth stand on its own, towering and undeniable. And as the days turned into weeks, Deshaun's world shifted in ways he hadn't expected. Messages flooded in, from fellow nurses, fellow soldiers, neighbors, and strangers he would never meet. Thank you for standing tall. You make us proud. You didn't just fight for yourself, you fought for all of us. One afternoon at a coffee shop called the Grindhouse, a man in a battered Vietnam veteran's cap approached him, his hand trembling slightly as he tapped Deshaun's shoulder. You didn't just stand up for you, son, the man said, his voice rough but unwavering. You stood up for every one of us who's ever been made to feel invisible. Deshaun nodded, words catching in his throat. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't splashed across television screens. Sometimes they live quietly inside the people you touch. Weeks later, Harlow and Markey faced the consequences they thought would never catch them. During disciplinary hearings, past complaints, long buried and silenced, came roaring back to the surface. It turned out Deshaun Briggs wasn't the first man they had wronged. He was simply the first they could not silence. Within 2 months, both officers were suspended without pay. Termination was recommended. And behind closed doors, civil lawsuits gathered strength. Not just Deshaun's, but others who finally found their courage. As for Deshaun, he didn't vanish. He returned to his post at Shepherd Medical Center, steady and unbroken. He kept saving lives. He kept showing up. Only now, when he walked those bright hospital corridors, people didn't just see a nurse. They saw a man who had faced injustice and refused to bow to it. But for Deshaun, this was never about revenge. It was about a deeper truth, that dignity isn't something handed to you. It's something you defend with your very breath every single day. The media, as it always does, eventually moved on. New scandals, new tragedies, new distractions. But in Wichita Falls, Deshaun's stand left an imprint that would not be erased. Small, imperfect changes began. Mandatory body cameras, sensitivity training, stricter policies on officer conduct. Late steps, small steps, but steps forward nonetheless. Deshaun never sought the spotlight. He didn't grandstand outside courthouses or shout into microphones. He chose another way. Quietly, he spoke at a local Veterans Day event, standing before a group of high school students. He told them the hard truths, that injustice is real, that dignity isn't begged for. It's lived in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you refuse to be broken, even when the world pushes you to the edge. And the kids listened, really listened, because standing before them wasn't just a news story. It was a real man, carrying his scars and his pride side by side. A few weeks later, 2 letters arrived at Deshaun's home. One, an official apology from the mayor's office. The other, a commendation from the Department of Defense for his service and his unwavering embodiment of American values. He didn't frame them. He tucked them quietly into a drawer beneath his bed. Because for Deshaun, true victory isn't found in pieces of paper. It's found in the silent decisions we make when nobody is watching. Deshaun knew he hadn't ended racism. He knew he hadn't stopped abuse of power forever. Those battles are older than any one man. But he also knew this. Change doesn't sweep in like a tidal wave. It's built one choice at a time. One calm breath when fury threatens to consume you. One refusal to sink when the world tries to drown you. One stand when everything inside you begs you to sit down. That is the legacy of Deshaun Briggs. Not a man who sought vengeance, but a man who reminded us all that true strength is quiet and dignity isn't given, it's defended. And if there's anything to carry forward from his story, it's this. Never let anyone else define your worth. Never let anger steal your grace. And when the world pushes you to the edge, stand tall. Speak truth. And remember that real power lies in knowing exactly who you are, even when others try to tear you down. If Deshaun's story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a reminder that even in the darkest moments, dignity shines brightest.